point of view always in life is we can do better. I was intensely curious, I was intrigued by the process, and I was inspired by the notion of giving back to my community.
You are listening to CEO Perspectives, a podcast by the Conference Board.
Welcome to this episode of CEO Perspectives, a signature series by the Conference Board. CEO Perspectives are conversations that take an objective, nonpartisan look at a range of subjects that matter most to business leaders. I'm Steve Odland from the Conference Board. I'm the host of this series, and in today's conversation, we're going to discuss what it looks like to run for office. How can a life in the C-suite prepare someone to run for office? Is it worth it? Any lessons learned? Joining me today is Wendi Taylor Nations, the EVP and partner at the Hawthorne Strategy Group and former candidate for Chicago City Council. Wendi, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Just tell us a little bit about your background, because most of it's been in business, not in politics.
Right. So I grew up in Indiana. My dad was a roofer. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college and the only one to have a master's degree. And then I worked my way through college and got an opportunity to move to New York City and get an internship at Rolling Stone magazine. So I began my career going from an intern to an executive assistant at Rolling Stone magazine. My dream, because I have an English composition undergrad degree, my dream was to be a writer, but I had student loans coming due. And so I found a job in advertising that would pay me a little bit more. And I was hooked on the confluence of creativity and strategy. And so I began in my career as marketing because I was so hooked on that confluence of strategy and creativity.
Yeah, and then you've had a career in marketing, going through communications and marketing roles, advisors and in seats. So a whole variety of experiences over time.
Yes.
So then along comes August of 2022, and you decide to run for office as a Chicago alderman in your local Ward 43. Some of our listeners know Chicago well, but for those of you who don't, 43 is north of downtown. It's a relatively affluent ward that's mostly in the Lincoln Park area. But Wendi, why did you want to be an alderman?
My point of view always in life is we can do better. I was intensely curious. I was intrigued by the process, and I was inspired by the notion of giving back to my community, where I've lived for almost 30 years. Most of my career has been mission focused, which is why I've gravitated to healthcare and topics like equitable access, as well as economic development. That old saying, nothing stops a bullet like a job, is really important to me. Many of my career moves in marketing I would call politically adjacent, meaning working with government organizations like Get Covered Illinois, rolling out the Affordable Care Act with the state of Illinois, and World Business Chicago, which brings foreign direct investment and jobs to the Chicagoland area. So when the former alderwoman announced her surprise retirement before the end of her term, my husband and I talked about it, and we decided, why not?
Yeah, and so, your background is a little unique for an older person. How did you think it prepared you?
My career's covered every aspect of marketing, advertising, public relations, digital, point of service, et cetera. So given that running for office is selling yourself and your ideas for public service and policy, I felt my background meshed with the job of a campaign. I've also led large, complex organizations, and I thought that experience would help in Chicago's typically messy city council.
Yeah, and messy is an interesting adjective for it. It goes back forever. I mean, the more local politics are, more local city council is an example of that. The messier it gets, and the more personal it seems to get. But there must have been something a little altruistic in your thinking here in terms of giving back as an older person.
Very much so. This community has been my family, especially during the pandemic when everyone shut down right away. We had several in my neighborhood, young widows who had just lost their husbands at the end of 2019. And they were in mourning and they needed companionship and care. And so my husband did, and I did things like, and this is very Midwestern, we've got a huge heater in our garage, and we'd throw garage parties, even in the dead of winter. Our doctor neighbor putting down or measuring between chairs for 6 feet and firing up that heater even in 15 below zero. So it was very much a formative moment for me to serve my community after the pandemic.
Okay, so what's the process here? So if somebody's thinking about running for office, and every office is slightly different, but how do you start doing this? Is there some sort of application you fill out? You do it online? What do you do?
Well, in this case, yes, but it's just a special process. I started with the former alderwoman, Michelle Smith, because if she didn't support me, I wasn't going to pursue it. She's very powerful, lots of influence. And I got her advice and counsel, and she told me to go for it. That meant, in this case, because she had retired before the end of her term, that I had to apply to be appointed to serve out her term. So I applied for the job, and it was online. I went through all the interviews, the background checks, etc. I was a finalist for the job, but I should make it clear that there was no way that Mayor Lightfoot was going to appoint me. I had done fundraising for Bill Daley when he was running against her for mayor, and she knew it. In addition, I'm very middle of the road politically, and she wanted to add to the progressive caucus on city council.
Okay, so this was a replacement in midterm, which is a little different, which is
That's correct.
More of an application process, to replace. Why did the former alderwoman step down?
She is the youngest of 8 children, and she's 67 years old, and she has a lot of siblings who have health issues, and that she needs to care for.
So family issues, and so that's what opened it up. And so this was an off election year process, and it was but you did still have to do some fundraising and, of course, campaign.
Well, I jumped in. I'd already decided when I applied for the job, I already decided that I was going to jump into the campaign. So that's how I began, is that application process. When I didn't get it, I told Mayor Lightfoot, I'm going to run anyway. And I did.
Yeah. Okay. And so, so you didn't get appointed. That completes that process. And that was the online stuff. Now, how do you start again in a campaign?
Well, as Tip O'Neill once said, money is the mother's milk of politics. And so I started raising money. At the same time, one of my opponents or potential opponents gave herself $750,000. So I knew that this was going to be an uphill battle. And while candidate quality and timing are really paramount criteria, money is vital. You can be the best candidate in the race, but if constituents don't know who you are and what you stand for, it really doesn't matter. Money is for marketing you, your background, your policy ideas, and your personal values. So that's where I began, raising money.
Yeah. And so how do you do something like that? I mean, most people you talk to would rather go to the dentist than raise money, especially the dentist. But what do you just knock on doors and say, hey, I'm collecting for my campaign?
No, it includes a deeply humbling 3 hours every day known as call time. You call every family member, everyone you've ever done business with, school friends, former and current colleagues, ex-boyfriends, and basically everyone you've ever known. And I even got $250 for my dentist.
Yeah, there you go. Well, an ex-boyfriend, that shows some dedication when you go to that extent. That's something. Well, did it get easier as you went along, or was it just kind of icky the whole way through?
It gets easier because you get into a groove, you get into a process. That part's easy. But asking people that you have personal relationships with for years and years and years, it's really hard to ask for money for yourself. I don't have any problem asking for money for the causes I'm dedicated to, but for yourself is a really tough ask.
Yeah, I can imagine it, and especially when it's going to be spent. It's not like it's going to be invested in something. It's going to be spent, and it's going to be spent on driving awareness of your candidacy, and that, so it's got to feel a little bit selfish in a way.
It does. And I should also mention that you need to tailor your pitch. That's really important. That's what gets people. So I had a whole list of Kellogg grads, and I said, help me be the first Kellogg grad in city council. They need smart people. And, that kind of thing really got people on board. Or help me be the first DePaul University grad to be on city council. People like that kind of thing. It's a good hook.
And those are your two alma maters. And did you call, like Illinois people and say, help from Illinois, or, how many universities did you use in that pitch?
Just my own.
Just your own. An honest candidate. Well, so you had to raise money, and was there a threshold that was really required to make, to kind of make it a serious candidacy?
Yeah, you need to have as a threshold about $125,000.
In the and that again, it's a local race, and so what do you use it for? How do you market yourself?
You use it for direct mail, especially in this ward. There are many high rises, and it's hard. It's not just hard; it's impossible to get in those high rises unless you know people. And you use it for marketing. It is really, and then you also build a campaign team. I should mention that. That's a really important part of doing this. I had folks from presidential campaigns, congressional campaigns, aldermanic campaigns, all working on my campaign. And it's built basically building a company, staffing it, and then driving it to bankruptcy on election day.
Yeah. And, it's probably worth pointing out, just so that people understand, there are no parties involved with this, which would normally be part of the process in a more statewide or national election, because everything's sort of nonpartisan at the local level. So
that's correct.
This is just you. I mean, you have no support from that end. This is just you kind of trying to organize this. Now, had you done this for somebody else or been involved in any other campaigns so you kind of knew the process?
I had volunteered, but that did not prepare me in any way, shape, or form to build a campaign.
Yeah, but that, if somebody was interested, that wouldn't be a bad way to get your toe in the water and kind of peek around and see how these things run.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
You raised the full amount, and you started using that for marketing. I assume, sort of digital marketing, email marketing, paying some people, that sort of thing. You knocked on a door or two, though.
Over 15,000 doors, thousands of miles walked. It's a very time intensive, and I also was working full time, so it's a very time intensive thing to do if you do it right.
15,000 doors, and that's a relatively small area. I mean, you could walk every street in the ward, and it sounds like you did.
I did.
Yeah. And did you have help? So there are high rises and big buildings, and the Lincoln Park groups and neighborhood groups. How did you tap all of that?
I got into the high rises through personal connections. So I would go to my friends and say, I need to have a meet and greet. Can you help me out here? And they would send out my information and invite people in. And so then in the dead of winter, I was stomping around all those high rises in the Gold Coast, going from place to place, dropping off my information, talking to anyone who would talk to me. I went to dog parks. I went walking with my friends who had dogs and stopping people on the streets. I went to big gatherings like Jonquil Park Wine Fest and handed out information and talked to people who were sipping wine. That's a good time to do it too, by the way. And generally just went everywhere and asked for access from anyone I could get access to.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of shoe leather, and that's probably where some of that campaign fund went to replace a little bit of shoe leather along the way. We're talking with Wendi Taylor Nations about how to run for office and her experience in running for Chicago aldermanic seat. We're going to take a short break and be right back.
What does the future of work mean for your employees? How will your company navigate ESG? Will there be a global recession? At the Conference Board, our experts translate the latest research and economic analysis into insights and real-time problem solving for your organization. Membership at the Conference Board provides your team with an assortment of knowledge, from economics, marketing and communications, ESG, public policy, and human capital. As a member, you'll have access to our center experts, member-exclusive events, data and benchmarking tools, and peer sharing that will help you understand the present and shape the future. Consider becoming a Conference Board member today by visiting www.conference-board.org.
Welcome back to CEO Perspectives. I'm your host, Steve Odland from the Conference Board, and I'm joined today by Wendi Taylor Nations, former candidate for the Chicago City Council. Okay, so Wendi, we talked initially about how you get going and, how you do the application process, how you start to raise money and press the flesh. What was your platform? I mean, what do you run on? What do you say? How do you determine what you're going to stand for?
Well, this is a personal note for me. I ran on crime reduction, education support, and out-of-character development. Our ward has seen a sharp uptick in crime in the last decade or so. And I was assaulted on my way to work in July of 2021. And that really shaped my campaign and my point of view on crime. So I had a personal experience with that, and I used it in my campaign to discuss what I had been through in this situation. Additionally, Harris Polls did a poll right before the opening of the campaign. They polled local or Chicago residents shortly before election season began that showed that crime was the number one issue amongst registered voters in every neighborhood. Thus, crime was number one on my platform. Then moving on, I didn't have much data for the remainder of my platform, but I did have endorsements and support from powerful, experienced politicians from my neighborhood. And they were able to provide me almost unlimited information about what concerned my constituents most. Finally, and most importantly, I asked people what they wanted and what was important to them, and they sure did tell me.
What'd you hear?
I heard crime, crime, crime. If I had never spoken about anything other than crime, that would be okay with most people.
Not taxes.
No, not taxes.
Interesting. And in Chicago, it's very local, and I think one of the previous mayors was referred to as Mayor Pothole because I think he spent most of his time dealing with resident complaints about the streets, and it's streets, it's sanitation, it's crime, it's things that affect them in their neighborhood, right? Very
much so. And Chicago is distinctly a neighborhood town, 77 neighborhoods, and each one of them is like a little town. My ward has 56,000 people.
56,000 people and several smaller neighborhoods too.
Yes.
It's not just one big deal. So, you have to understand the unique character of each of those pockets in there, which is again, all that shoe leather. So did crime really resonate the way you expected it to as the lead platform item?
Very much so. It was on top of everybody's mind. It continues to be on top of everybody's mind.
Now, did that differentiate you from the other candidates, or were they talking crime as well?
They were all talking crime as well, but they didn't have the personal experience that I had.
Yeah, and so that must have been a little brave on your part, to share that and kind of have to share it over and over and over again. It's like probably felt like you had to relive it every day.
I did, but it was also important for other women to hear what I had been through, because my assault is hugely underreported. According to Chicago police statistics. And I wanted them to know that they should report those kinds of gropings and attacks.
Yeah, not good. But this is what's going on out there. So how did others differentiate themselves from you? So if you looked at some of your competitors in the race, how were you each unique?
Well, there is a great power in incumbency. And that's what the appointed alderman had, and the power with the mayor behind him. So there was a lot there that was really helpful for him for fundraising, because incumbency truly is a strength. Once you have the seat, it's hard to unseat someone. And so he was already the sitting alderman, and that differentiated him. There was also another person who was running, who is the head of president of one of the neighborhood associations, and that's what he used to differentiate himself.
So there were 2 other candidates?
Or 6 candidates total.
Yeah. So you described those 2 who are men. How many men, how many women?
2 women, 4 men.
Interesting. And I presume some diversity in there as well. So
yes.
Yeah. So lots of, lots of distinctive stuff. Chicago politics can be vicious. That and that's probably true of most big cities or, most local areas. What was your view? Did you find it to be a difficult situation?
It was. Fortunately, because I've handled so many crisis situations and so much bad behavior in my career, that I have a little bit of a Teflon skin against it. I think generally the general temperature of all political efforts right now has risen significantly in the last decade or so. I don't know how to fix the big picture, but when I criticized my political opponents, it was their ideas and their performance, not them personally. And I'd like to see more of that in all campaigns.
Did you get attacked personally?
I did.
Yeah, why?
There was a situation that I was involved with, a lawsuit that was was in defense of my youngest godchild, and they used that against me. I refused to settle because I didn't do what I was accused of. Yeah, that was used against me.
Yeah, but see, these are it could be anything, but these are the examples that come up. So, for people who are thinking about running at some point, you're going to get everything pulled, and the internet makes it so easy to do.
Yes.
And they'll pull it, they'll twist it, they'll turn it around, they'll use it negative, even relatively minor situations, they'll turn it around. I mean, if you got a parking ticket, then you're a scofflaw. So these are the kinds of things that happen to you, and you have to be thick-skinned and brave enough to weather all of this, right?
You do. And I again, I've got a bit of a Teflon skin because I've helped people through this many times.
Yeah, but it's Teflon skin when you're helping somebody else. But when it's directed at you and people are saying nasties about you or lies, I don't know, people don't tend to call them lies anymore. Mistruths, maybe. When they're saying the falsehoods about you, I mean, that hurts, doesn't it?
It does. Of course it does. Yeah. Especially when you know that it's all false.
Yeah. And then you stand up and say, I did not do XYZ, and all everybody hears is
XYZ.
So it's hard to win in that situation, which is why negative campaigning is so prevalently used.
But the thing to remember is I had a whole bunch of supporters and defenders who were very public about their support and defense of me in clarifying the record. I was accused of being a homophobe, which, as a person who is a long time ally of the gay community, that was especially hurtful. But boy, did my friends come to my defense.
Yeah, well, that's nice to have those kind of friends. Now, you knocked on a lot of doors, you did a lot of miles. You've got to have also some real positive stories that came out of this.
Oh my gosh, so many. There was the woman who invited me into her home on the coldest day of the year and talked to me about my campaign. And as I was leaving, put $500 cash in my hand and said, "You are a brave lady." So that was really unexpected. Then there was the 92-year-old man, Bob, who came to every fundraiser and every meet and greet to harangue people into voting for me. And that was quite lovely and funny.
Well, that was nice of your Uncle Bob.
Yeah. And then there were he was not my uncle. Then kidding. There were many, many, many people who volunteered for me, who knocked on doors for me, who came to my defense, who even after their day job spent hours at night in the cold and in the snow because they believed in me. And that was very important to me. And then there was also, and this is both fun and really made the other candidates angry. The unhoused people in the neighborhood who wore my campaign pins and passed out my literature because they said I had always been kind to them.
Yeah, well, kindness really does trump all. It's so important. Ultimately, you didn't win this, and part of the reason, as you said, was that there was an appointee that was appointed by the mayor and supported by the mayor, obviously, to fill out this partial term before the full election, and so that little experience then made this person, in seat, to give him some experience and so forth. But any other reasons that you think, looking back, that you didn't prevail, and could you have done something differently?
Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, my team was assembled from former presidential campaign folks, congressional, and alderman campaigns. And so they were super experienced and knowledgeable. They ran the numbers and they did the analysis. It all came down to the Tip O'Neill comment, which is money is the mother's milk of politics. It all came down to money. The only other woman in the race spent $750,000 of her own money, and she captured, according to my campaign analysis, my likely voters. So people who had voted for the former alderwoman who was endorsing me were torn between two women who had significant business experience, and in the woman who gave herself money's case, political experience, and those likely voters were split between her and me. The second thing is I made campaign mistakes. I was slow to assemble an experienced campaign team because I didn't have the network. I was slow to begin fundraising because I didn't know how, and I didn't raise enough money to overcome that $750,000 spend against me. Okay,
so what should you have done differently? Put together a team faster, raise more money, essentially?
Yes.
Go negative?
I really don't believe in going negative. Again, the personal attacks, I think, make other people look bad, and I didn't want to respond in that way. I didn't want to get in the gutter. It was really important to me to focus on their performance and their ideas rather than them personally.
So after this experience, would you recommend to people who are not relative political novices to try this and do this, have this experience that you have?
I would. I passionately believe that outsiders can win, and they often do. And I also think to not believe is to succumb to the notion that things can never change and that you as an individual can't make an impact.
Any other advice for our listeners who may be thinking about doing this someday?
Yes, I do have some advice. I recommend to anyone who has a desire to care for their community and our country, also through public service, to run. It's a learning and growing experience that you can't imagine until you're in the thick of it. I did not win, but a wise person said to me just recently, you didn't lose, you gained an experience. And I think that's something really important to remember.
Well, words to live by. Wendi, thanks for sharing your great experiences with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And thanks to all of you for listening in to CEO Perspectives. Every week, I'll be joined by a prominent thought leader to provide insights on the issues of our time. We'll cover leading topics in geopolitics, economics, public policy, ESG, and more. Please share CEO Perspectives with your colleagues, with your friends, with your neighbors, with everyone you want to campaign with someday. I'm Steve Odland, and this series has been brought to you by the Conference Board.
You have been listening to CEO Perspectives, a podcast by the Conference Board.